Our belief is that together we can tackle our community's toughest challenges and make real, meaningful progress. Thank you for being here today and for all of you and for all that you do to help move York County forward. YCCF's vision is that York County is united, prosperous, and growing with opportunities for everyone to thrive. We fuel community transformation by inspiring life-changing philanthropy and grant making. YCCF's Fund for York County allows us to be agile on the most pressing issues. Currently, we are awarding grants to programs and collaboratives that remove barriers to economic mobility for low-income individuals in our county. Research suggests that dismantling barriers and connecting financially insecure individuals to sustainable economic opportunities is the foundation of an economy that works for everyone. YCCF is able to provide those opportunities thanks to the donors like many of you on this webinar today. A gift specific to the Fund for York County in any amount supports programs like the two you'll hear from today. It allows you to be a part of the transformative work happening now, next year, and far into the future. Today, you'll hear from two of York County's transportation experts about how they are ensuring that low-income York County workers have reliable and affordable transportation. They'll share the challenges individuals and families face when it comes to transportation. They'll share a few success stories and the ways that you can get involved in supporting solutions. As always, we welcome your input as we remember that together we thrive. It's my pleasure to introduce Jason Andrews, Grants Program Manager here at YCCF, who will moderate today's discussion.
Thank you, Natalie. Our grant making is focused on transforming lives and our community by helping people thrive. We do this by helping individuals, especially those who are low income, build economic mobility. Why this focus? 1/3 of York County households are financially insecure. That means that people are living paycheck to paycheck, and they are one car repair or health scare away from financial crisis. We look to leverage our efforts with partner organizations, such as the York County Economic Alliance and the United Way of York County, for greater impact. To address this critical need, YCCF has our Thrive Grant program, funded primarily with dollars from the Fund for York County. Grants focus on programs and collaboratives that transform lives and our community by helping people with limited income overcome barriers. This is not just to plug a hole, but to holistically address the variety of needs that low-income families face so they can be less dependent on government subsidies and other programs and able to live a life of economic independence. Having access to reliable, affordable transportation is key to achieving economic mobility. However, there are many factors that limit someone's ability to access transportation. Despite strong programming and initiatives in place around transportation, access continues to be an issue. Transportation is particularly challenging for workers who don't work traditional hours or who live in areas underserved by the public transit system. YCCF and our community partners are working to make sure low-income York County workers have options for reliable transportation. Today, we'll dive deeper into what challenges exist, and to make that a reality, how our guest speakers are working to solve challenges, and even hear some success stories. Our first guest speaker is Sherry Welsh, PhD, LSW, Senior Project Manager at Susquehanna Regional Transportation Authority and Administrator at Rabbit Cares. Sherry is a champion for equity, access to the social determinants of health, and mobility as a fundamental right. Welsh has spent a large part of her career working in the public transportation industry. Through her work, she has become heavily involved in various community groups and committees aimed at improving services in the community. Sherry's focus has been on improving transportation services for marginalized populations, specifically for families with lower income, older adults, persons with disabilities, and veterans. Through her work at Rabbit Cares, Sherry seeks to secure financial resources to support transportation needs that fall outside of the traditional transportation funding streams. Dr. Welsh is an active member of Healthy York and is chairwoman of their Access and Empowerment Committee, the Pennsylvania Public Transportation Association Community Transportation Committee, American Public Transportation Association Mobility Management Committee, York County's Welcoming Workplaces, and various service coalitions that promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Sherry holds a bachelor's and master's of social work from Millersville University of Pennsylvania, as well as a PhD in social work from Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. Our second speaker is Eric Saunders, Executive Director of New Hope Ministries, a Christian social service agency that impacts over 22,000 people from Adams, Cumberland, and York counties each year by helping them obtain basic needs and equipping them to change their lives. Eric is passionate about helping solve the problems of hunger, homelessness, unemployment, and helping children and families. Eric has a master's degree in social work from Indiana University and holds a bachelor's degree in communication with a minor in biblical studies from the Master's College. Eric serves on Pennsylvania's Department of Community and Economic Development's Housing Advisory Committee and the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture's Emergency Food Assistance Advisory Committee. In 2019, Eric was honored as a Champion for Health, Professional of the Year from the Partnership for Better Health, and in November of 2019 was honored with the Central Penn Business Journal's Game Changers Award for being a most respected nonprofit CEO. In 2023, Eric received the Central Penn Business Journal's Nonprofit Innovation Award for leadership. As Natalie shared, this is our third year doing the Together We Thrive series. And in previous episodes, access to transportation has been named as a barrier to other elements of financial stability, like the ability to get and keep a family-sustaining job. But what are the barriers to accessing transportation? Sherry, I'll kick it to you.
Okay. So as you had mentioned, while you were first speaking, you talked about one of the challenges for lower income individuals in the community. And, one of the challenges we face is, really reaching individuals who do work those non-traditional hours. So when you talk about public transportation, you're really talking about reaching the greater good of people. And so it's difficult sometimes to reach those non-traditional hours, the weekends, the evenings. And so that really is one of our larger barriers. And then in addition to that, when you're thinking about lower income, the cost itself of public transportation. So it is much cheaper to use public transit compared to owning a car, but even that cost, though nominal, can be a challenge for individuals. So we also have to think about, when we think about the greater good, we tend to have more population density in the city areas. So those that live outside those city limits in the more rural communities, we struggle to get individuals in those areas the transportation that they need. So that's always a challenge, not just here, but really nationally and probably internationally as well. We also have challenges with individuals who work in industrial parks. So we will provide transportation throughout the communities and we have various stops, and yet we can get them so far. So there's this first last mile challenge that we struggle with to get them the remainder of the way, because if we went into each of those spaces to each individual door, obviously we would not be able to provide the coverage that we currently cover. That would then just exacerbate the challenge of where we can't meet the needs. We also have, when you think about those challenges, they're more broad difficulties. But when you think about the more individual scope, things like individuals who are struggling with navigating the landscape using a mobility device such as a wheelchair or maybe crutches and things like that. So that in and of itself adds challenges just to the transportation process. In addition to that, things like how do you navigate while carrying packages, especially if you're an older adult or someone who has a disability, someone who's frail. All of those things present challenges to not just the individual and those others that are riding, but the transit system itself. It adds additional time to the routes. And then, of course, that's putting the time schedules down, decreases the ability to maintain those schedules that we try to adhere to. So again, that's a problem too. So I think in general, there are many, many different challenges from our perspective.
I would agree completely with everything you said. I think the structure of society is based upon transportation because where we need to get food and where we need to access childcare or healthcare and where we need to work and where we need to live aren't located within walking distance anymore. And unfortunately, we don't have, robust, public transportation systems that serve every community and every population. So what it means is that for most folks, we're dependent upon personal automobiles for transportation, which opens up a whole other range of how do you get a driver's license if, people in your family don't drive and have access to a car? You also have, there are a lot of hidden costs to being low income and poor. One of those is without adequate credit, or if you don't have the best credit, being able to access affordable transportation really isn't an option. And I think, in my work at New Hope Ministries, what I've seen is people are stuck in poverty because they can't access employment without transportation. But you can't get a car if you don't have a job, and you can't get a job if you don't have a car. And without some external assistance, it's really hard to break that cycle. Well, just go get a car. Well, how are you going to get a car loan? How are you going to afford that car payment? How are you going to be able to demonstrate that, the ability to maintain that asset? And so there are all sorts of shadow economy alternatives of, very inexpensive cars that aren't very reliable that people end up having to depend upon, or conversely, very expensive solutions where people vastly overpay for transportation and they get locked into, vehicles or transportation that isn't sustainable. So even if you are able to access unreliable transportation, the moment that car stops running, if you don't have the funds to maintain that vehicle, then you can't get to work and your employer is going to let you go. And it starts this cycle of, loss of employment, unreliable work history. It's not the only factor that affects people. Certainly education and childcare, job skills, those are all critical needs as well. But I would say access to transportation is such a crucial barrier to employment and economic stability. And so the other things that we run into, of course, I appreciate your comment about disability. There are people that physically can't drive either because of age or mobility status, et cetera. Those with histories of incarceration. There are people who have made unwise choices or have been forced into less than optimal solutions and have penalties. And they don't have a driver's license. And then, being able to access affordable car insurance. I mean, there are a lot of costs involved with transportation. And so, even with the best transportation solutions, there's some folks that a traditional automobile are not going to be their best solution, right now. Maybe we can work towards that. But I don't want to make it sound like the problems are insurmountable. I mean, there's definitely pressure points where we are finding we can really make a difference, and we'll talk about that. But boy, a car can be a life-changing, asset for families.
Certainly. And I think transportation is really something that permeates all of these other factors and things that we talk about, right?
Right.
Now, whether it's employment, childcare, unless you're fortunate enough to live in one of the very few areas where that may be walkable, you need transportation to
Absolutely.
connect to all of these other things that you need to live a life where you can be a productive member of the community.
Absolutely.
So transportation is crucial to many facets of life, but especially employment. What is the role for employers to play in this process?
Well, I love including employers and, you know, the workforce system in this conversation, because it's not just about nonprofits, it's not just about individuals, it's not just about, you know, charitable funders like the Community Foundation. One of the things that I hope employers will realize is the importance of transportation to their employees and knowledge of resources in the community that can help their employees to be more transportation sustainable. And so knowing about programs like each of our organizations offer and be able to give knowledge and information to an employee that would make them a better worker, that there's no cost. You just have to know what's out there and to be able to push people in the right direction and give them knowledge. The second one I would say, and it may be outside of the scope of our conversation, is pay people a living wage so that they can actually afford their, you know, food, their housing, their transportation needs on what you're willing to pay them.
Yeah, I think that certainly falls within the scope of what we talk
Okay.
about.
And, you know, and I say that because, you know, my organization, because we do transportation, but we also do workforce training, and our target is help people find jobs that will pay a living wage so that they can afford their basic living expenses, and, you know, help them learn the financial skills to be able to manage their household budgets, including the cost of transportation sustainably.
Share your thoughts.
So I think one of the first and foremost points of this is really about painting this in a way that we recognize that the employers are partners in this effort. So obviously
Well said.
we're the transportation providers or the experts in the field, but we can't go it alone. And so it's important to point out really that it's a win-win effort here for us as the providers, the employers as those who need employees, and also the employees themselves. So there's a lot of benefits to employers who work with the transit providers in this process. So really looking at, you know, the ability to maintain a workforce. We know that right now there is a large challenge in that, in not just this location, but like everywhere really. So, you know, you can really increase the talent pool. There can be decreased parking costs. I know that's a challenge for some employees, which a benefit really by partnering with individuals like ourselves who work in the sphere of public transportation and nonprofits. There's also the aspect of employee well-being. Really, people feel less stressed if they know that they have a transportation means available to them. Have you ever not had a car and what that feels like? I've had that situation where I just feel trapped and like, oh my goodness, how am I going to figure this out? So just that alone, what that means for the ability of getting work from your employee. And I think the other thing is really the employer branding, like to be able to speak to that. And, you know, we really care about our employees in that way. I think that speaks a lot and, you know, really will attract more employees to your organization. So I think there's a lot of benefits to it. Yeah, I think it's really about a partnership. It's not just about us as public transit agencies or nonprofits. It's a partnership.
Yeah, certainly mutually beneficial, even cutting down on those turnover costs. You know, the more that you can retain employees, the less that employers have to incur those costs that come with regular turnover.
Right. It becomes an employer of choice.
Mhm.
Like I want to work somewhere where I know that my employer cares that my needs are met.
You know, I had the experience because as a nonprofit, we're also an employer. You know, we've got
Uh-huh.
employees and they've got transportation needs. I had an employee with some health issues last year, and had to be not able to drive for a couple of months. And, that was going to seriously impact their ability to, get to work and, fulfill their job. And fellow employees banded around to pick them up, take them home, kind of had to work the schedule that other people were working, but creating a culture where it's okay to talk about your needs and we look out for one another. And I got to talk to that employee. We were on a trip somewhere recently, and he said, I've never worked someplace where people, went out of their way to try to help me get to work. And, I would have loved to have taken credit for that and say, yes, we're a great employer. I have a great workforce of people who look out, and take care of one another. And so, encouraging culture, to care for one another. And I think, beyond that, just recognizing that, at the end of whatever transportation crisis people are dealing with is a great employee. Don't jeopardize that relationship because they're inconveniencing you in the short term and miss out, on being able to get an amazing employee. And the loyalty from my coworker who's just, so appreciative that we didn't give up on him. Like, well, you're a great worker. Why would I give up on you just because you're facing, this crisis right now?
Well, and I think it's
Absolutely.
important then to talk about what that means. So we're saying it's important to think about partnership, but what does that mean? So in my world, we as public transit providers, we really encourage employers to think about things like location flexibility. So if you have multiple sites in your organization, is it possible for an employee to work at a different site that might be along a bus route that might provide ease of access for that employee? Or what about flexible work hours? So we talked a little bit about that second, third shift challenge. Maybe second or third shift doesn't work for that individual. We also have some hospitals or doctors' offices that have special transportation dependent, public transit dependent schedules. So if they see two people coming in, they'll kind of prioritize that individual because they know that they're dependent on that bus that's going to be coming soon.
Right.
So I think that it's important to think about that. Also, like schedule coordination. So we know that, we can't be at every single stop at 8 a.m. So maybe to think about like, what does the route one look like? So maybe at this end, people start their shifts at 7. As we get to this end, maybe we start at 10, just kind of thinking logically about that partnership. How do we make it work for the people that need it to work? Yeah, so really just kind of working together, the organizations that know that their employees are going to be using public transit so that they can work for their employees the way they want their employees to work for them.
Right. Thank you both for sharing.
Mhm.
As funders and community leaders at YCCF, we know that there are some great programs bringing solutions to these transportation challenges. In fact, we funded some solutions that both of your organizations are implementing. Can you share how you are addressing these challenges in the community?
Absolutely. So one of the programs that you guys did assist in funding is our grocery cart program. So I had mentioned earlier just really how it's a challenge for older adults and people with disabilities really to navigate the public transit system. And we started to see people who might be 70 or 80 years old who are coming onto the bus, and what seems like it may not be a lot to us who are still very able-bodied, carrying 3-5 bags. That becomes a major challenge for someone who is already at risk for falls. So by issuing a grocery cart to that person, that's like a game changer. And so we did a survey of folks who had received a grocery cart from that program, and 82% of them said that having that grocery cart makes the difference between having groceries in their home or not. And so that's a pretty big number. And so we're really determined to keep that program growing. We do often operate at where we have a waiting list, which is unfortunate, just because we don't have the funds coming in, but it is a program that has demonstrated such need. Other programs that we have, so we have worked with Giant grocery store, which for the folks that are lower income, the Alice population, they subsidize a route that provides free transportation to the giant stores. It stops at many of the lower income housing locations, 3 times a week to the east location, 3 times a week to the west location, and that's free for riders. So we do have the ability for folks to subsidize routes if that's something that folks are interested in doing. We also do partner with some employers already that house that have many employees, and they do have some of those alternative shifts available, so that helps with some of those challenges that we already talked about. I think one of the things that also really helps is that we have really great partners in our city planners and our county planners in really making sure that as folks are beginning builds in the community, really keeping transportation in mind as they're beginning those projects, because what we see often is these beautiful spaces will come open, but they'll be in more rural communities. But because they're available and beautiful, they'll want to jump into them and say, great, this is a perfect place to build this housing complex. And then they build this beautiful location, and then after the fact, they think, oh yeah, transit. And then transportation has to try to figure out how to make it work, and a lot of times it doesn't. So then we have this housing development of people who have no transportation. And so now we've left them stranded in this rural area. And so I think it's important to keep in mind that we need to be at the table when folks are coming together to build programs, housing, industrial parks, all of those things. It's important to keep public transit in mind, because, you know, not to say because then we need programs like Eric's, but then we need to try to find programs for individual people, where in public transit, you can find a solution for more people at once. And I think that's a good thing too.
Well, and for so many individuals out there who are renters, you know, some of these new builds, if transportation has not been coordinated, public transportation, you're essentially saying you must be a vehicle owner to live here, to have adequate transportation to get where you need. And that significantly cuts down on options for people looking
Absolutely.
for housing.
Absolutely.
You know, we've funded traditional, transportation programs like bicycles and bus passes and, but again, if you live in Lewisberry and you work in York, that's probably not going to be your best solution. And there may be a great route, I don't want to discount public transportation, but for a large majority of people, it doesn't work, well for them. And so personal vehicle ownership ends up being the best solution.
Absolutely.
Again, not a very affordable or sustainable solution, but we've been working on that. And so to kind of back up, folks who are heard of New Hope Ministries know us as a food pantry, and that's kind of where we started as saying, oh my gosh, you're experiencing a basic needs crisis. Let's supply that basic need. But all we ended up doing is creating a stability, or a dependency loop. And so they had to keep coming back to us for that basic need. And the fundamental circumstances weren't changing. And so that led us into workforce development. And, if you can get a family sustaining job, it is, it improves your housing, it improves your kids' educational outcomes, it improves, your transportation options. I mean, a lot of good things happen with good employment, but getting to that point requires a lot of resources like childcare and transportation. And so we said, well, what would it take to enable people to have those transportation? And so we started with people just give us their cars, which is amazing. And I want to say thank you to all those who do. I can get 20 cars a year, in a good year, which is fantastic. And I hope they keep coming. But if I'm trying to help 1,000 families achieve economic stability, 20 cars don't go far enough. But the first thing that we did is let's just give people a car. And you know what, if they know how to maintain that vehicle, and they can afford to maintain that vehicle, boy, it opens the door to employment and all these other great life options. But recognizing there aren't enough free vehicles in the world, we said, well, what else could we do? And I think for people to take that step towards employment, they had to have a short-term transportation solution. And we said, that's easy. Let's do Uber rides. We'll just pay for Uber, and again, not to discount Uber, we were paying $1,500, $2,000 a month for
That's a lot
Uber,
fast.
and we couldn't sustain that at scale, and they weren't going to be able to sustain that as a, ongoing transportation solution. So we said, okay, we need an alternative to rideshare. It's a great program at, in the short term, but in the long term, it doesn't work for everybody. And so we said, okay, what if we could get people a temporary vehicle and take those free vehicles, quote unquote, donated vehicles, fix them up and put them into a loaner fleet. And so we are, we're working on having 20 vehicles this year that we've taken the best of those donated vehicles or purchased a few with some grant funds. Thank you, Community Foundation. And we say, this is your vehicle to drive for the next month to help you get your job training, to help you do job search, and to help you start in a position and say to an employer, yes, I have access to reliable transportation. And people have had the most amazing experiences getting out of their stuck situation and being able to get into fully employed. But if all I did was say, well, you could borrow our car forever, I wouldn't be able to help people. So what we've targeted is, let's go for a month. If you need a second month, it's there. But at the end of the process, we need to have access to a personal vehicle that's affordable and reliable. And so we've created a transportation coordinator role who could help people choose a car that meets their needs. What's the size of your family? What is your budget? What's the type of commuting that you need to do? Something Uncle Larry might, help you when you're choosing your first car. Again, think about folks who have never gone through that process. And, he's going to kick the tires and you say, you don't want that one. That's going to give you a lot of maintenance challenges. That requires special fuel. This is your best bet. So Rick, our transportation coordinator, will actually help people create a transportation plan, help them through the vehicle buying process. We're actually partnering with automotive dealerships in the community who are willing to certify these vehicles and are leaning in charitably to say, we're going to pass along some special vehicles at our cost, so that we're targeting vehicles in the $5,000 to $7,000 range for people to purchase. But, one of those barriers is lack of access to financial services. We are creating a second chance vehicle financing program with our partners at Members First. And so for folks who have demonstrated employment, who have completed soft skills and financial literacy classes, who are, working with a caseworker to develop stability plans in their life and showing themselves dependable, we are able then to certify them to a lender who will say, we will extend credit to you, market price loans, what you or I might be able to get when we go to our lending institution. And folks who have had a repossession, who have had, some credit problems, maybe a bankruptcy, they're suddenly not only able to access affordable financing, they're also able to start rebuilding their credit, which means they can start achieving future goals like home ownership or, other things in their life. So we're like, this is great. We've got short-term options, we've got knowledge building options, and we've got long-term, personal vehicle, ownership options. With the whole idea, and this is a secondary program for us that's to support employment and economic stability. And those are the pieces that have to work together. But a very generous grant from the Community Foundation made it possible for us to do these robust services in York County.
Well, I
this
think
past
what
year.
you're talking about really is about self-sufficiency. And I think
Absolutely.
you're building that from the ground up. And, kind of to bring it back to Rapid Transit,
Yeah.
we have a veterans transportation program that kind of has the same concept in mind. So, owning a car isn't for everyone, for whatever reason, the same as, public transit isn't for everyone. It's a multimodal mindset that Rapid Transit holds. And so our veterans transportation program really builds in the opportunity for someone to to grow into being independent in it. So if someone is seeking employment, it's specifically for employment. So if someone is seeking employment, we will pay for the passes for them to obtain employment. And then once they obtain employment, then the first month we will pay 100% for their monthly pass. The next month we'll pay 75%. The next month we'll pay 50. The next month we'll pay 25%. And then ultimately the goal is for them to be self-sufficient in funding the cost of their public transportation. You know, I think the other thing is for employers, going back to that employers as partners, really having employers build into the benefits package. You know, one of the benefits of our organization, Rabbit Transit, is, you know, we work in public transit, is to have an employment pass that we can ride transit for free.
Nice.
So that would be a great benefit for other organizations to hold too, like to really subsidize that, to make sure that their employees never have to worry about that. So I think really just that self-sufficiency, you know, by having a job, this is a benefit that you get because you are being self-sufficient in your role. So I think that that's a great benefit to have.
That, you know, there are no one size fits all solutions. So
Mhm.
depending, you know, people have different needs, they have different, you know, commutes, you know, that they need to be responsible for, and having as many solutions as possible. And I think one of the things that we discovered when we launched our new transportation initiatives is there's quite a few families that have a vehicle, but it's not running. It's not
Mhm.
inspected.
Yes.
It, you know, they may still be making payments on that vehicle,
Right.
but you know, they're so upside down, they can't afford to maintain that vehicle. And so part of our program, you know, which we didn't anticipate, but really has borne a lot of fruit, is to say, let's get you caught up on that deferred maintenance. Let's address that major component. We've got some automotive folks that have offered discounted parts, you know, to us, you know, so that we're able to make some fairly significant auto repairs at cost rather than at retail. So that has helped out a lot. But then to give people the knowledge to know how to follow a vehicle's service schedule, you know, so that they maintain that vehicle in operating condition. So yeah, we can invest a couple $1,000s into getting your vehicle up to, you know, standards. But now you have to be responsible for maintaining that going forward and giving, you know, so everybody who participates in a transportation program has to go through a basic automotive maintenance course for us. And then they've got the support of a caseworker. And sometimes it's not resources that people need, it's knowledge that there's somebody they can go to and say, I got this check engine light on and I don't know, is this worth repairing? Is it time, you know, to make a change? What would you do? And again, I'd talk to Uncle Larry. Not everybody's got one. So we've got Uncle Rick.
I think certainly not a one size fits all solution to
Exactly.
this issue, but a common theme across both of the programs that you both spoke about is this structure of supports, right?
Yeah.
To help
Yes.
people get to that level of self-sustainability rather than just, here's a solution, we're going to drop you cold now and let you add.
And it's an empowerment focus rather than a dependency focus, that
Mhm.
we are not going to do for you what you can and should be doing for yourself. We will give you hurdle help. You know, we will provide temporary supports that's going to encourage that self-sufficiency mindset.
Well, thank you both for the amazing work you are doing to help people have access to reliable transportation so that they and their families can thrive. We've talked together about how having access to reliable transportation can change their lives. We'd love to share some of those success stories with our audience that you both have had over the years.
Well, my goodness, there's, you know, we've had dozens, if not hundreds, you know, just over the last couple of years. And a couple come to mind. The first one is, even though I've emphasized the importance of the short-term vehicle loaner program and the second chance financing, there is still an important role for the vehicle donation program. You know, I encountered a mom who was had her own struggles, who was caring for adult children with disabilities. And all she was capable of working was a part-time job that didn't pay a living wage. And so, but that was her best employment capacity right now for her life. You know, is just working some retail, you know, just do she She was just getting by and she lost her car. You know, and suddenly she was faced with, she was going to lose everything. She was going to lose housing, the ability to care for her children, you know, because she couldn't replace that vehicle on her salary. And we just looked at the budget and we said, helping her into a better job is not in the cards right now. Maintaining her situation. And we said, absolutely. We had a car with some hail damage. We called it the golf ball because of all the, you know, but it was functional, reliable. And we said, we're going to gift you this car because it is going to sustain you for a number of years to come. And we can work on some of those longer term objectives. And so she's been able to maintain employment, maintain housing, continue to care for, you know, these adult children with special needs. And, you know, hopefully it buys us time to be able to get some more services into the family. And so, you know, when somebody gives a vehicle, it can change a life, whether it's a loaner vehicle or whether it becomes a gifted vehicle. Another one was a young man, and if we, you know, if this gets posted with a slideshow, I would encourage folks to look for a very happy African-American gentleman in the slideshow, or you can find it on our Facebook page. But he was working low wage jobs, not able to care, you know, for his family's needs, and wanted to do a truck driving program and become a commercial driver. Which is a very good paying job, but couldn't get to the CDL classes without reliable transportation. And the program worked exactly how it was designed. Here's a Hope Rides vehicle. You can, that's our loaner program. You know, you can drive our car while you're completing your training. And then once he completed the training and he got his job, and he was, you know, financially able, we helped him with some down payment assistance to get his own personal vehicle, you know, and so that he continued to get to the job. He's doing so well that he's come back and contributed to the organization, you know.
That's
And
phenomenal.
you know, absolutely. And it's been, you know, not that it didn't require a lot of hard work on his part, but his family has experienced financial success, and transportation was one of those stepping stones, you know, along multiple parts of his journey that helped him achieve his financial goals. And that's kind of the optimal solution, what we're hoping for everybody who comes through our transportation and workforce programs.
Awesome. So in our, as I mentioned earlier, we have the grocery cart program. I already said the number 82% said that it makes the difference between someone having groceries in their house or not. We know that 95% of that same group said that having a grocery cart makes their trip safer. I think that that's a real success story. Our microtransit service, which addresses that first last mile issue we talked about in some of our microtransit regions. And it also addresses that rural challenge in some of our more rural regions. One of the larger nonprofit organizations has said that microtransit has been a game changer, which I quote that all the time, has been a game changer for their clients because transportation is one of the biggest challenges. We know that many of our veterans who use the veterans program say that without this service, they would not be able to get the life-sustaining care that they get. We've provided over 30,000 free medical trips for veterans with this program. So you think about what that really means in our life. Like if you're battling cancer, like 30,000 trips related to cancer or chemotherapy or other life-sustaining trips, what that means. So I think that's the success, like to be able to, number one, live, but to be able to live safely, to be able to stay engaged in your community and not be abandoned in your home without a support system that we talked about throughout the course of this conversation.
Transportation is a human right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I actually just did a training with our staff. So ADA is very prominent in our world, like ADA compliance. And, you know, in some regions, you know, ADA is more of a right than running water. That's a fact. So it really is a human right. It has to be available for people.
Love it.
Well, thank you both for sharing. It's incredibly moving to hear how someone's life can change drastically by having their transportation needs met. For our audience members, how can they get involved? How can they help?
So.
Please go ahead.
So I think, I mean, the obvious is, from a financial perspective, there is always room for giving to programs like the grocery cart program, the veterans program. We're always looking for support to those programs because we do struggle to fund those programs and really to keep them going. The absence of those programs means that people can't get those trips to life-sustaining medical appointments. It means they can't get access to groceries in their home. So it's important. But outside of the giving, I think it's really about thinking, how can we be partners to public transit? How can we keep them at the table when new builds are happening, when we're planning on building a new housing complex? Also, how can we partner with public transit in employing our employees? Is there flexibility in how we structure our shifts? Is there flexibility in how we structure the days in which people work? Because we know that during the week, it's more availability in public transit. If you operate a health system, is there flexibility in how appointments can be structured? Is there a priority for folks that are transit dependent? There's also, as I mentioned, with the Giant, there is the ability to subsidize routes if there is a specific need that someone might have. Yeah, I think it's really about partnering with public transit and not keeping it at arm's length, really kind of holding it close and keeping it as a priority to the work that you do, because really we touch every aspect of the community: social determinants of health, infrastructure, human services, healthcare, all of that, and just really keeping us, close.
Well said. I think from New Hope Ministries perspective, we are so well supported by the community. We were founded as a community organization to address local needs, and 41 years later, we're still doing that work. And so it's so important for me to say thank you for those who have supported the Community Foundation, as well as our organization, with their gifts, with their time, with their referrals. Telling somebody where help is available is such an incredible gift. If you encounter somebody who can't afford to maintain a vehicle, to sustain employment, you could send them to New Hope, and you would be helping them, and you'd be helping us fulfill our mission. Obviously, there need to be resources available. We are so appreciative of the York County Community Foundation for their ongoing generous support, both for our transportation program, but also our many other programs. And so thank you to their donors, and encourage you to continue support the Community Foundation so that they can support initiatives like Hope Rides and New Hope Ministries transportation and employment programs. It really makes a difference. If you happen to have a vehicle that you're looking to get rid of and you're thinking, I like the idea of what's an extra vehicle to me, could help change a life and make a difference in my community, we would be thrilled if you'd consider donating that vehicle. It might join our transportation loaner fleet. It might be a vehicle that's given to a family in need that's going to help absolutely change their life. It might not be a super reliable vehicle that goes to auction, but provides financial support. Obviously, if it's a good running vehicle, we're going to use it. But, even a less than optimal vehicle still can provide some amazing support for programs that are changing lives. And so we'd be grateful for that. And certainly, if you have time available and you'd like to get involved in mentoring or detailing cars, specifically related to transportation, or just working in a nonprofit organization where you can interact with people who could use a helping hand, we'd be grateful. We got an awesome volunteer program, and we'd welcome you to come and help.
So we've covered a lot here so far
Yeah.
today, but I think if there was one thing that both of you could convey to those of us, or those who are joining us this morning and those who might be watching the recording, to really take with them and remember about transportation and about the need, what would that be? What would you want to convey to them?
Don't take your transportation for granted. You have an amazing privilege if you have access to a personal vehicle. not everybody in the community. So allow your giftedness to be able to influence your perspective of others, of imagine, just what it would be like to not have, that awesome resource.
That's great advice.
It's hard to come up with something other than that. I mean, the other thing is play the lottery because the lottery does benefit public transit as well. So I do think that there's a lot to be said about just really appreciating what we have, because I do think we take it for granted. It's one of the things that we say a lot on our Rabbit Cares website. We do take for granted that we can just jump in the car and go grab some milk. But at the end of the day, you can have the best human service agencies in the world. You can have the best educational institutions, but if people can't get to them, they really hold no value. It's really key to keep public transit at the key to all of it, because it's the connector to everything. So I think well said, don't take it for granted.
That's right.
Thank you both. So we're going to hop into some brief question and answer. Those of you who have joined us who put questions in the chat, we will try to get to as many of them as we can. So this one is coming for you, Sherry. How can someone donate to the grocery cart or veterans program?
So on our website, if you go and search Rabbit Cares, there are options to donate to Rabbit Cares, and there are specific buckets to pick which of those you would choose to donate to.
Thanks. And for Eric, can people who already have a car sign up for the automotive classes?
Yeah, that would be awesome. There's not a lot of cost for us. And so if somebody wanted to contact a New Hope Center, they could get in touch with Rick and he could sign them up for some instruction. We've even got some really neat car care. They get a bucket of cleaning supplies that comes with graduating from that class. And so we would love to have people learn a little bit more how to care for their vehicle.
That's great.
I was thinking when they said the check engine light, I was like, that would be a great class I should take.
Yes.
I think we could all benefit.
Absolutely.
So we have a few more that we're pulling together.
Okay. Well, you want to tell some more stories while we're
Certainly.
wrapping up?
Please.
So when we started doing our transportation program, there were just these gaps, that were like, oh my gosh, I can't figure out how to solve this. And it was, I actually had a donor that came to me and said, would you dream? Would you just think big about what you could do that you're not already doing now, and how we might be able to facilitate making that happen? I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I said, transportation. It is one of the biggest barriers that I think we could actually do something about. And so the power of giving, of going to, a nonprofit like New Hope or, Rabbit Cares, and just be able to say, what could you use? We're going to challenge you to think big. The donor family is so excited. It has been so much fun for them and so rewarding for them. And for the people who are experiencing, the benefit, it has been, just life-changing. And it is getting a lot of buzz right now,
That's great.
and we just see the program continuing to grow throughout the region.
And I think there's a great point in there too, that even from our perspective as a funder, it is important for us to listen to our nonprofit organizations. What do you truly need to help the individuals that you're serving, rather than telling you and forcing you into a box that otherwise you wouldn't have to be in?
Just like we need to listen to the people who are using our services, and not making assumptions about what they're going to need.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And Sherry, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, we really see individuals every single day that are telling us about the value of the work that we do, and other organizations in the community. How they connect to different organizations in the community really couldn't happen without organizations like Rabbit Transit, Rabbit Cares, and also New Hope. So I think it's just important to keep public transit, I keep saying it, but keeping public transit held close, because it's the link to everything. So, yeah.
So a question for you both. How broad is the information spread to make people aware of these programs?
It is certainly a challenge for us. because you deal with this if you throw the net too wide and you don't have the resources, then you get frustrated people. And so we've been working hard at keeping the program a little secret. And, we're now in the phase of, okay, we've got the capacity in place that we think we can serve a lot of folks. And so we are very intentionally doing webinars like this. And I did a press conference with United Way last week and, talking about transportation, and we're doing signage and, social media and, just everywhere we can get the word out. And so, and certainly our target would be our workforce development programs specifically, but we think that there's the ability for it to even grow beyond that and, serve other populations in need. But right now it's all about workforce. If you're looking for a job, don't be afraid, to get in touch with us, and we're going to help you with your transportation needs.
So for Rapid Transit and Rapid Cares, we do serve an 11-county region. So we focus our efforts on that 11-county region to get the word out. I do think that it can be a challenge because, unless you're in need of public transportation or are struggling with transportation, you're not really thinking or looking for information about public transportation. It's very similar to, purchasing a stove for your home. Unless your stove is no longer working in your home, you're not thinking about it. And it's the same with public transit. The other challenge is many of our programs have specific criteria. For example, our senior shared ride program is available to folks that are 65 and older, and we have people turning 65 years old all the time. And so until you're 65, you're not really interested in this senior shared ride program. So it is a constant challenge to keep people informed. And that's another reason why it is so important for us to stay so engaged with our partners, including the Community Foundation with the Embracing Aging program, but with all of the different organizations within our 11-county region, just so that we can stay in contact with their caseworkers, who tend to be the #1 referring partner to us, just to keep that information out and available in the community. So it is a challenge to keep people in the know of what's happening, especially, as I mentioned, because public transit touches everything, not just the individual. It touches the infrastructure, it touches the municipalities, it touches the workforce, it touches everything. So we have to have our fingers dipped in every single aspect of our communities. So it's tough, but it's a challenge that we continue to work on, and we want to be informing everyone of what we do.
Yeah, and I think it goes to Eric's point earlier, just to keep issues such as transportation top of mind. There were times in my life where I relied heavily on public transportation, and it's incredible post that time how quickly, the privilege of having a vehicle and driving every day, how quickly that's not something that crosses my mind as it did on a daily basis at one point.
Because you're not looking for a stove.
I'm not looking for the stove.
Well said.
I think that's all the questions we will take today. If you have any more, feel free to reach out to us, and we are happy to pass those along to either Sherry, Eric, or answer them the best that we can. As funders and community leaders at YCCF, we know that there are some great programs bringing solutions. Apologies. Thank you all for joining us today to learn about this critical challenge that impacts our entire community. If you'd like to stay for an extended question and answer session, we'd be happy to have you. If you cannot, the additional questions will be shared in a video of the event that will be emailed to you. At YCCF, we will continue to learn more about the challenges facing our neighbors who struggle to become economically mobile and strive to find and be part of the solution. Having accessible, reliable, and affordable transportation is key to achieving economic mobility. We are committed to leveraging our grant making to fuel community transformation. If you want to support the work happening now, next year, and into the future to increase economic mobility in our community, please visit yccf.org and reach out to our development team to learn more. Please stay tuned for our next Together We Thrive webinar, and thank you all for joining us this morning.